I thought I might talk a little bit about my own beginnings and my evolution as an artist. For me, that was sort of a big, scary word. Pretentious. I never felt comfortable with it. As a kid, I used to love to draw and paint, but the older I got, I think the more intimidated I was by the idea of being good at art, and I really stopped doing anything in any sort of public setting. When I was a young adult living in New York after college, a boyfriend gave me a pottery class because I had taken a class in high school, and he used to hear me talk about that all the time. And that was really when I started all of this. I was 23 years old, living in New York, and I just always loved the idea of working on a pottery wheel. And for me, it wasn't intimidating in the same way that other forms of art were, because I was learning an ancient skill. I was working on this wheel and really learning, as I said, a skill. It wasn't about making art. It was just about making a functional bowl or making a functional vase. And for some reason, it freed me up. I loved doing it. I was there all the time. I got better and better. And then, of course, wanted to spend more time there as I got better. But as I say, my roots really were as a functional potter. I love making things that people can use. And if it's pretty, if it's beautiful, that's gravy. Of course, I want things to be beautiful and pretty, but I also, most fundamentally, just want them to work, work at whatever function they're meant for. So you see here, these are all functional pieces. You could take it out. I could take out this pitcher, for instance, and I could put water in it, and I could put cream in it, and I could use it at a brunch for my friends and serve coffee, and they could use this, and if it broke, it's not a big deal because I could make another one. But I love that these have a purpose, that you can use them. You can take them out of the box and you can use them, and it's true for all of these pieces. For many of the pieces in the show, in fact, they're completely functional, except that there's paper involved. There are other things involved that might get in the way and might be damaged themselves. But as I said, that's where I started. And so that is still the starting point for many of these pieces. I've just taken functional pieces and I've added other elements that somehow seem to elevate them to art, or to what people will call art. For me, I guess I'll always see myself as a potter. At some point in the years, I was telling my little son that I was a potter, and then I felt that I'd become a ceramist because I was making more than just pots. And recently, I said, I think that I've gone from ceramist to artist. I sort of whisper it because it still sounds a little pretentious to me, but the truth is, it's felt like a very organic growth, and that by pulling in other materials, I've definitely moved beyond pure ceramics into a realm which I guess can only be called art because there's no other word for it. But it's a wonderful thing to be able to have ideas and to actually implement them, and then to have a beautiful gallery space where I can bring them in and share them with people. So here you see some functional pieces, a bottle. There's some other bottles here. I don't know if we can look at those right now, but this is a completely functional bottle that, when it was still wet, I sliced in two and added chicken wire, again, one of my favorite elements. And I found some beautiful paper. I wove it into the chicken wire. And as you can imagine, this bottle was only yay high, but then when I put the chicken wire in, I could have put even a bigger piece of chicken wire in, and it's climbed to the sky. But I don't know if you can see this, but I have a little twig, a willow twig, and from the willow twig is a piece of string which supports a scroll made of, again, paper and rubber stamps. I wrote something, some favorite words of mine, and the scroll also has little twigs at the end, turning it into a scroll. And the words here, very simple, it just says, "Blue skies ahead." A friend of mine said that her father lived by that slogan, and I loved it. You should know that today, when we're taping this, is September 11th. And I had been thinking I wanted to do a little something more to this piece. It didn't feel finished to me. And this morning, I happened to see an image of Philip Petit, who, as you recall, back in the 70s, walked across the Twin Towers on a wire. And I saw an image. I'll hold it up here. I don't think you can see it from there, but it's a tiny little image of this tiny little man on this high wire walking between the Twin Towers. So I found it online, I printed it out, I cut it up, I created this little twig cage for it, and somehow I'm going to put it on Blue Skies Ahead, because to me that's where it belongs. So here he is. And the nice thing about having a show, as I said, with shade, I can sort of switch out what's in the shade. I also can add pieces, I can subtract, I can enhance. It's fun. I go to bed at night and think about what I can do tomorrow to the pieces in the gallery. So here we're going to add a little man on wire to Blue Skies Ahead. So there's that. I have a couple of other bottles here. I can talk about those. This one is called Treehouse. It was one of the last pieces I did for the show. In fact, it was the very last piece I did for the show. And people will often ask me, what is your favorite piece? In truth, they're all like my children, and I feel very uncomfortable naming one as a favorite. But I do feel comfortable telling you that every time I'm working on a piece, as is the piece I'm working on, it's my favorite piece. This happens to be the very last one I did for this show. So in my heart, this is still my favorite piece because I haven't made another one yet. But I had this twig that I found in Rustic Canyon Park, which is my neighborhood park. I had a bunch of twigs that I collected that were sitting on the floor of my studio, used for various things, and this one seemed just right for this. I actually had this bottle in my studio for a long time. I loved it. It was just a piece that was sort of perennially sitting there with me. And I had cut these little holes in it when I made it because I wanted to have spiraling chicken wire around it. So it was sitting like this in my studio. I thought, oh man, this would be a beautiful base for a treehouse with that little twig I see on the floor. So I picked up the twig and I managed to just attach it here very securely with some twine, and I put some glue there so it's all very securely in place. And built a little house. I put the house on top of a twig, and then I had to find some way to support it. So I just with twigs and twine created a little platform for it. So that's Treehouse. And what you can't appreciate, even if you're standing here, is that I have a quote inside the house on a little piece of paper. It's a quote from Gustave Flaubert, a famous French novelist of a century or so back. And the quote is, "The principal thing in this world is to keep one's soul aloft." And to me, that was what this is all about. In fact, it's what my pottery is about. It keeps my soul aloft, just doing this art and the joy that I find in it and that I hope others find in it. It's all about that, just keeping your soul aloft, a place far above all the troubles of the world, and trying to find joy in my own life and bring joy to other people, for me, is the important thing. So that's Treehouse. These are two functional pots. These are probably the simplest things I have in the show because they're really just pots. When they're still wet, I use my thumb to create these indentations in them with the idea of putting anything I find that is of beauty that will fit inside these little niches. These are twigs. You see, you can lift them right out. They're twigs from my local park. I think there are lots of sycamore trees. There are lots of eucalyptus trees. I think these are from a eucalyptus tree. But there they go in my little niche. And then these are pebbles. I just love the colors. Very fortuitously, the color of the blue matches the color of the glaze here. And I've actually done a series, not evident here, but I love stacking stones. I love stacking pieces. I make totems of stacked pieces that climb high into the sky. So this is just a tiny little version of that, these stacked stones. And I have to confess that I can't trust that they will stand there without some help, so I did put a little museum wax between them all so they have some support. And then again, this is another example of a bottle that's been sliced in two. I have actually two pieces of chicken wire. One has nothing in it, it's just in there supporting, and then this piece is on the outside of it. And again, the idea of shelter. I happen to have a dog I adore who is a rescue dog. He came from a shelter. And for me, that's the first thing I think of, apart from home, when I think of shelter, my little dog and this home. He was in a very sad home before coming to my home. And so the numbers here, which you can't really see, but they're actually the geographical coordinates of the West Los Angeles Animal Shelter. And the quote that I have hanging here on the scroll is one of my favorites. It's from Milan Kundera, who wrote The Unbearable Lightness of Being, if you're familiar with that. This, I think, is just something he said. He clearly loved dogs, too. And this quote is, "To sit with a dog on a hillside on a glorious afternoon is to be back in heaven, where doing nothing was not boring. It was peace." I'll get choked up. So this is really about my dog and the shelter and taking him out of the shelter and to the beautiful hillside at Will Rogers Park, where we spend so many hours. So those are bottles. While we're on this shelf, I'll point out 2 other things, both of which contain poems. I'm a great believer in the Writer's Almanac, which you can subscribe to online, and you get a poem a day from Garrison Keillor. These are both poems that I discovered through that. This first one is called Success Story. I won't read it, but it's basically about finding the beauty in your every ordinary day life and how that alone is success. So I'll leave it. You can look it up. It's by Terrence Winch, Success Story. And you'll see I just, I threw on my wheel. I made this, this cylinder, and then I have these very, very tiny pieces of type, and they're actually meant for leather work, where you pound in the letters on leather, but I use clay instead. So these actually take a very long time. So I punched in the letters, and then I fired it once and rubbed in some black underglaze so that you could actually read the letters, because it stays in the indentations. So, and then I managed to rig it up. I'm going to turn it around just so you can see what I did, because it took me a while to figure out how to make this work. I have it on a twig. But I wanted to make sure that the twig actually supported it and that it turned easily. So I used twine, and you'll see I just wrap twine around and around and around so that it supports both sides of this cylinder. And it also stops it from moving back and forth in the hole, and also adds a little bit of friction so that it will stop where you want it to stop. And you can read it very easily. So that's a success story. And actually making it was a success story, because it took me a while to figure out how to make it work. This one here is another beautiful poem called The Patience of Ordinary Things by a woman named Pat Schneider. And again, it talks about the beautiful, simple things in life, how a cup holds tea, how the last line, and this is my favorite probably, and what is more generous than a window? So for me, so much of my work is about windows. And that there is nothing more generous, because it's completely transparent. It opens up what's beyond and lets you look through with no interference at all. So here's my little poem, Through the Window, The Patience of Ordinary Things. Look it up, because it is one of my favorite points in the world. This is the last piece we'll talk about today. It, again, is a piece that I've been wanting to make for a long time. I love making ladders. For me, it's very meditative. Just tying them all, putting all the rungs in place, clipping them, cutting them, trying to make it straight, cutting them again. And this one I would have had go higher and higher and higher, except that there was only so much room in my house to do that. But you'll see, I don't know how many rungs there are. There are a lot of rungs and a lot of ties. I secure it with pebbles. Again, pebbles, a constant theme in my work. The twigs, the string. At the very top, I have a house. It's a cabin. And it's made completely of twigs and rocks, little stones. And you'll see, if you can see that little swirl of the fire smoke coming out of the chimney, that's chicken wire. And one thing I do like to make sure in all of my pieces that there is some clay element, because I find sometimes I move farther and farther away from that. Inside the house is a little piece of clay, actually 3 little pieces of clay with 3 words on them. Like my other piece here, it says "Blue Skies Ahead," which seemed appropriate for a house looking out into the world. And again, I used some of that beautiful Japanese paper that I found the day before my show opened, and put on it another quote that I love, this one by William Wordsworth. He says, "Bliss was it in that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven." I think he was speaking of the French Revolution, to be young in the French Revolution. For me, though, it's about raising my children here in Southern California and having them go out on beautiful hikes and play in the water of the beach and just enjoying this heaven we have here. And I called it Almost Heaven. The idea is that the twigs don't quite make it up to the house, and the house doesn't quite make it up to heaven, but this is as close as we're going to get, and it's a beautiful thing in itself. Again, my name is Moy Thompson, and I am a ceramist, sort of an artist, moving into art. I live in Santa Monica Canyon, and I have a website, which is sometimes under construction, like right now, but I should have it up and running fully in the next couple of days. It's Moy, which is my first name, spelled M-O-Y-E, moyceramics.com. You can also Google me, to find a lot of images of my work over the years. I also have a Facebook page, so if you go to Facebook and look under Moy Thompson, you should be able to find me there as well. And all my contact information is there. I'm constantly making new things. I'm always dreaming up things to make and trying to make them. So if you'd like to see what's going on or like to see what I have in my studio at any given time, feel free to email me and I'll send you images. Thank you.